Belinda Reed stepped off the plane at LAX, exhaling as the warm Los Angeles air greeted her. After 3 exhausting days in Chicago taking care of her mother post-surgery, all she wanted was to get home, collapse onto her bed, and let her cat, Snowy, curl up beside her. Dragging her suitcase toward the baggage claim, she fought against the weight of fatigue. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from Mia, her close friend and colleague at the small PR firm where she worked. "Belinda, sorry for the late text, but the client made last-minute changes. Can you check your email ASAP?" She sighed, quickly tapping a response. "Just landed. I'll check once I get home." Absent-mindedly, she tucked her wallet under her arm as she reached for her suitcase. Just then, her phone rang. Todd, her boss. "Belinda, sorry to bother you so late, but..." She barely registered the words as she wrestled her suitcase off the conveyor belt. Juggling the phone, her luggage, and her drowsy thoughts, she didn't notice the exact moment her wallet slipped from her grasp and landed on a nearby seat. Only when she neared the exit did she instinctively reach into her coat pocket for it, only to find nothing. Her stomach dropped. Frantically, she rummaged through her purse, checked every compartment of her carry-on. Still, nothing. Her wallet was gone. Belinda's pulse pounded in her ears as she scanned the area around her. Maybe she had just misplaced it. Maybe she had tucked it somewhere without realizing. But after rifling through her bag for the 3rd time, dread settled in her chest like a stone. Her entire life was in that wallet. Credit cards, ID, cash, and worst of all, her Metro card. Without it, she'd have to dip into her dwindling bank account for a rideshare home. That was if she even had enough left to cover the fare. Biting her lip, she turned back toward the baggage claim, weaving through the crowd of passengers. Her eyes darted frantically across the floor, the rows of chairs, and the edges of the conveyor belt. Nothing. A lump formed in her throat. Losing her wallet wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a full-blown crisis. Before she could spiral further, a deep voice cut through the noise. "Excuse me, are you looking for this?" Belinda spun around. Standing before her was a tall man with sharp features, dark hair neatly styled, and an air of effortless confidence. In his hand, he held a familiar black leather wallet. Her breath hitched. Relief flooded through her so fast she nearly felt dizzy. "Oh my God, yes, that's mine," she gasped, snatching it from his hand and clutching it to her chest. Then, realizing how abrupt she must have seemed, she quickly added, Thank you so much." The man smiled, a faint curve of his lips that hinted at amusement. "I saw it near the baggage claim seating, looked like it had just fallen." Belinda exhaled shakily, still processing her near disaster. Now that she had a second to breathe, she took a proper look at him. He was undeniably handsome, with strong shoulders, a crisp navy blue jacket, and the kind of effortless style that suggested wealth, but not in an ostentatious way. I really appreciate it," she stammered, tucking the wallet securely into her bag. "I can't tell you how panicked I was. I'm Belinda, by the way." "Patrick," he extended a hand, his handshake firm but not overbearing. "Glad I could help." Something about the way he held eye contact sent a flutter through her stomach. Impulsively, she blurted, "Let me buy you a coffee or something. I mean, as a thank you, I insist." Patrick hesitated for a split second, as if surprised by the offer. Then a slow, intrigued smile spread across his face. "I won't say no to a coffee." Belinda gestured toward the small Starbucks kiosk nearby, suddenly hyper-aware of his presence beside her as they walked. It was strange how a moment of panic could shift into something entirely unexpected. The Starbucks kiosk near baggage claim was packed, the hum of conversations blending with the whir of espresso machines. Belinda led the way, still trying to steady her breath after the near disaster of losing her wallet. Patrick followed beside her, exuding a quiet confidence that made her hyper-aware of his presence. They reached the counter, and she quickly ordered a cappuccino. Patrick, unsurprisingly, asked for a black coffee. "You strike me as a no-nonsense coffee drinker," she remarked, filling the silence between them. Patrick chuckled, the sound smooth and easy. "Something like that." He studied her for a beat, his dark eyes glinting with curiosity. "And you? Cappuccino?" "It's a good balance, not too bitter, not too sweet." Belinda smirked. You analyzing my personality based on my coffee order? Maybe. He leaned slightly against the counter. Am I wrong? She shrugged, trying to hide her smile. I do like balance. They grabbed their drinks and found a small table near the window, tucked away from the heavy foot traffic. Most of the seats were taken, but as if by some small stroke of luck, one opened up just as they walked by. Belinda sat across from Patrick, taking him in properly now that they weren't standing. He had an air of effortless elegance, dressed sharply without seeming like he was trying too hard. The watch peeking from beneath his sleeve wasn't a brand she recognized, but it looked expensive. So, Belinda, Patrick started, resting an elbow on the table. Just getting home? She nodded, blowing on her cappuccino. Yeah, I was visiting my mom in Chicago. She had a minor surgery, so I flew out to help for a few days. That's thoughtful of you. She insists she's fine, but I could not be there, Belinda admitted. I'm glad I went, but I've been running on fumes, early flights, work emails piling up. It's been a week. Patrick nodded knowingly. Sounds exhausting. What about you? She asked, tilting her head slightly. Coming home or heading somewhere else? I travel a lot for work, he said, but yeah, I'm based in LA for now. She raised an eyebrow. What kind of work? He hesitated for a brief second before answering. Investments. I oversee business acquisitions and expansions. Belinda blinked. That explained a lot. The polished demeanor, the effortless way he carried himself. So you fly around making deals? She mused. Patrick smirked. Something like that. She didn't push for more details. Instead, she steered the conversation to something lighter, telling him about her job and PR and the constant juggle between creativity and client expectations. Patrick listened attentively, nodding occasionally. Marketing and PR, it's more of an art than people give it credit for. Belinda's smile widened. Not many people put it that way. They should, he said simply. Branding can change everything. They ended up talking longer than either of them expected. Somehow, amidst the chaos of the airport, the world outside seemed to fade into the background. Finally, Belinda checked her phone and sighed. I should probably head home before my inbox explodes. Patrick nodded, setting his coffee cup down. Are you good getting home? She patted her bag, reassured by the weight of her recovered wallet. Yeah, I'll grab a cab or take the metro. He stood, picking up his carry-on. I'll walk you to the taxi line. She blinked, slightly caught off guard. Oh, you don't have to. I know, he smiled, a knowing, easy expression. As they stepped outside, the brisk LA night greeted them with a swirl of cool air. The line for taxis wasn't too long at this hour, and within seconds, Patrick raised a hand as a cab rolled up. He reached for the door, holding it open for her. For some reason, the moment felt heavier than it should have. Belinda turned to face him, feeling an odd pang of hesitation. Thanks again, Patrick, for everything. His lips quirked at the corners. Glad I could help. And then, just as she moved to step inside the cab, he reached for her hand. His fingers were warm against hers, steady but gentle. Before she could process it, he lifted her hand slightly and pressed a light, lingering kiss against her knuckles. Belinda's breath hitched. It was an old-fashioned gesture, something out of a movie, and yet it didn't feel outdated. It felt deliberate, like a quiet promise. When he let go, she realized her cheeks were warm. Good night, Belinda, Patrick murmured. She swallowed, barely managing a soft, good night, Patrick, before sliding into the cab. As the car pulled away, she watched him fade into the background of flickering airport lights. A part of her wanted to roll down the window, to ask for his number, to make sure this wasn't just a fleeting moment. But she told herself that was silly. Still, even as she gave the driver her address, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about tonight had shifted her world in a way she wasn't ready to name. The morning sunlight filtered through the half-closed blinds, casting soft golden streaks across Belinda's bed. For a moment, she lay there, letting the warmth sink in, snowy curled contentedly at her feet. The events of the previous night flickered through her mind, the rush of panic, the unexpected kindness, the deep timbre of Patrick's voice as he handed her wallet back, and then, the way he had taken her hand, pressing that brief, old-fashioned kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so small, yet it lingered. She exhaled, shaking herself from the memory, and reached for her phone. The screen was already flooded with notifications, texts from Mia, emails from Todd, and then her breath caught. An email from Patrick. Subject, hope you got home safe. Her heartbeat picked up as she clicked it open. Hi Belinda, I hope this isn't too forward, but I wanted to check if you made it home okay. Also, I found your business card in your wallet. Figured I'd use it as an excuse to reach out. It was a pleasure meeting you despite the circumstances. Patrick. She stared at the screen, her lips parting slightly. He had reached out. Not out of obligation, not because he had to, because he wanted to. Before she could second-guess herself, she began typing. Hi Patrick, I made it home safe thanks to you. Honestly, I'm still in shock that I almost lost everything in that wallet. You saved my life. And my finances. I really enjoyed our conversation. If you're ever up for another coffee, this time it's on me. Her finger hovered over the send button. Was this too forward, too casual? But he had been the one to email first. With a deep breath, she hit send and set the phone down. For the next few hours, she buried herself in work, answering emails, adjusting campaign strategies, forcing herself to focus. But no matter how hard she tried, the distraction was there, subtle but persistent. The way Patrick had listened to her, the ease of their conversation, the weight of his gaze holding hers. And, of course, that kiss on her hand. By lunchtime, she had resigned herself to occasional glances at her inbox, telling herself she wasn't waiting for anything in particular. Then, at exactly 2:08 p.m., her phone buzzed. New email, Patrick Hayes. Her heart did an embarrassing little flip as she opened it. Hi Belinda, another coffee sounds like a great idea. Maybe somewhere less hectic than an airport this time. What's your schedule like? I'm around for the next couple of weeks before my next trip. Patrick. A slow smile spread across her lips before she even realized she was typing back. Tomorrow evening, 6 p.m., there's a great little cafe in West Hollywood. Quiet, cozy, no risk of lost wallets. Let me know if that works. She hit send before she could overthink it. For the first time all day, the tension of deadlines and emails seemed to loosen. Because tomorrow at 6 p.m., she had a coffee date with Patrick Hayes. And something about that felt like the start of something neither of them had planned for. The next evening, Belinda arrived at Cafe Verona, a small tucked-away spot in West Hollywood that she had always loved. It was cozy, with warm lighting and a quiet hum of conversation that made it feel intimate rather than busy, the kind of place where you could lose track of time over good coffee and easy conversation. She stepped inside, smoothing her blouse as she scanned the room. Then, she saw him. Patrick was already there, seated at a table near the back. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't distracted, just sitting there, waiting for her, his dark eyes lifting the moment she entered. A small, welcoming smile touched his lips. Belinda suddenly felt the warmth rise in her cheeks. Why was she nervous? They had only met once. This was just coffee. Still, as she walked over, she was hyper-aware of every step. You're early, she said, setting her bag down as he stood slightly, an old-school gesture of politeness. I had a feeling you'd be on time, he said, his lips tilting in that subtle, knowing way. Didn't want to risk keeping you waiting. A strange flutter went through her at that. They ordered, Belinda sticking with a vanilla latte this time, Patrick going for his usual black coffee. So, he said once they had settled in, tell me about this PR world you navigate every day. Belinda chuckled. It's a mix of creativity, strategy, and, let's be honest, convincing clients that their ideas aren't always the best ones. Patrick smirked. Sounds a lot like business negotiations. Except, you deal with millions of dollars and I deal with press releases and social media campaigns. Don't underestimate the power of a strong brand, he said, taking a slow sip of his coffee. Perception can make or break a company. Belinda tilted her head, intrigued. That's a surprisingly insightful take on marketing. Patrick's expression was unreadable for a moment, but then he leaned back, his fingers lightly tracing the edge of his coffee cup. I deal with branding all the time, just in a different way. When acquiring a business, its image matters almost as much as its financials. People don't just buy products. They buy into a vision. She studied him. He wasn't just some investor moving numbers around. He understood the emotional pull behind decisions. "So you travel a lot," she said, changing the subject slightly. "Does that ever get exhausting?" Patrick exhaled, looking thoughtful. "It does. Sometimes it feels like I'm never in one place long enough to actually live there." Belinda nodded, suddenly understanding. "So, last night, picking up my wallet, staying for coffee, was that you slowing down for a minute?" He gave a soft chuckle, but there was something honest in his gaze when he said, "Yeah, I think it was." The conversation flowed effortlessly after that, winding through topics from travel stories to the best hole-in-the-wall restaurants in LA. They laughed over shared frustrations, hers with stubborn clients, his with stubborn board members. It was comfortable, natural. Time slipped away faster than Belinda expected. When she finally glanced at her phone, she realized nearly an hour had passed. "I should probably head home," she admitted, setting down her empty cup. Patrick nodded but didn't move immediately. Instead, he studied her, as if weighing something in his mind. Then, in a voice lower than before, he asked, "Would you have said yes if I had asked for your number last night?" Belinda's breath caught slightly at the directness of the question, but instead of feeling put on the spot, she found herself smiling. "Yes," she said softly, "I would have." Patrick's lips curved into a slow, knowing smirk. "Good," he murmured, pulling his phone from his pocket and sliding it across the table. "Then let's not make the same mistake twice." She picked it up, typing in her number, her fingers feeling surprisingly steady despite the quickening of her pulse. When she handed it back, their fingers brushed, just for a moment, but enough to send a quiet current through her. Outside, the night air was crisp, carrying the sounds of the city's distant hum. Patrick walked her to the sidewalk, standing beside her as she waited for a cab. "I'm glad we did this," she admitted, glancing up at him. Patrick met her gaze, his voice steady. "Me too." A taxi pulled up, but just before she reached for the door, he did it again, took her hand, turned it slightly in his, and pressed another soft, deliberate kiss against her knuckles. Belinda barely breathed. "Good night, Belinda," he murmured. She managed a quiet, "Good night, Patrick," before slipping into the cab. As it pulled away, she realized her heart was still racing. This wasn't just coffee. This was something else entirely. Something that, for the first time in a long while, made her want to see what happened next. The week passed in a blur of meetings, emails, and late nights at the office, but no matter how busy Belinda was, Patrick was never far from her thoughts. They had texted back and forth, brief but effortless exchanges that somehow made her days lighter. A joke about bad airport coffee, a recommendation for the best ramen in the city, a casual "hope your day isn't too crazy" that had no right making her smile as much as it did. So when Patrick texted on Friday evening, "Are you free tonight? I have something I want to say. Meet me at the Overlook at Griffith Park," she didn't hesitate. It wasn't a fancy restaurant or an upscale bar. It was simple, thoughtful, and that made her anticipation all the more intense. By the time she arrived at the scenic Overlook, the city of Los Angeles stretched out below, twinkling in the cool night air. Patrick was already there, leaning against the railing, hands in his pockets. He looked up at the sound of her approaching footsteps, and when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. "I was starting to think you stood me up," he teased lightly. Belinda smirked. "Please, I wouldn't miss an invitation this mysterious." He exhaled, shaking his head with a soft chuckle, but there was something serious beneath his amusement. They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, staring at the endless sprawl of lights below. Then, Patrick turned to her fully, his expression shifting. "I don't do this often," he admitted, his voice quieter now. "The whole, meeting someone and actually wanting to see where it goes." Belinda's heart thudded. He hesitated, as if choosing his next words carefully. "I've spent years moving from place to place, chasing the next deal, the next business opportunity, and I told myself that was enough, that it was just how my life was supposed to be," he exhaled. "But then I ran into a woman at an airport who was so caught up in a work call that she dropped her wallet without noticing." Belinda laughed softly, shaking her head. "That woman sounds like a mess." Patrick smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Because there was something raw behind them. Something honest. "I don't want to keep living like I'm always on my way to somewhere else," he confessed. "For the first time in a long time, I want to stay." Belinda felt the world still around her. "I want to be here," Patrick continued, his voice steady, "with you." A quiet, shaky breath left her lips. She had been so careful, so cautious with her heart, but standing here, with the city below and Patrick looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered, she knew. She wanted that too. Slowly, she reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "Then stay," she whispered. Patrick didn't hesitate. He cupped her face gently, his thumb grazing her cheek, his touch reverent, like he was memorizing her. And then, finally, he kissed her. It wasn't rushed, wasn't uncertain. It was slow, deliberate, like a promise, like something real. And as Belinda melted into him, she realized that maybe, just maybe, losing her wallet that night had been the best thing that had ever happened to her.